Welcome, Robin, to Metalating Pages. It's a great pleasure to talk with you again, because we spoke 3 years ago about the ocean, the last album at that time. Now we spoke about the new album related to, and more things related to the metal world. So therefore, we will begin by asking. So how was your last tour here in Latin America? Because at that time, were your expectation reached, and did you realize the comments of many musicians says about the people here are much more passionate than Europe or United States?
Well, touring South America is always a great gift and a pleasure for us. And yeah, we didn't really know what to expect from this last tour because it's been a long time since our last time over, which was in 2016. And it was very good, really good shows everywhere. Where are you based? Are you in Mexico or?
Well, we are based in Mexico, Colombia, and Peru.
Okay, right. Yeah, so the Mexico shows were really good. We unfortunately didn't make it to Colombia or Peru, but we did Chile and Argentina and Brazil, and it was all really, really strong shows. And yeah, people there are crazy, and that's great. You know, that's like makes it so much more enjoyable for us. And we usually make the experience that touring the more peripheral places is more fun because people are less jaded and are just much more appreciative of international bands coming over to play. It's the same whether you go to South America or whether you go to the east of Russia or like to India. Generally the places that are off the beaten tracks of America and Europe are usually more fun to play because people are just so much more into it, and that was the experience on that tour as well. It was great.
Okay, talking about the past, and in a previous interview that we had in 2020, we talked about the concept that made you put together with a whole lyric idea since Precambion 2007. So does this new Holocene belong to this whole lyrical concept created on your 2007 album, or is this new one out apart from her general concept in Precambion?
Well, it is a continuation still, but it's also obviously something new. It was altogether an album that wasn't really planned for. It all happened when Peter started sending me ideas in the pandemic, and I started adding guitars and drums to it, and we started bouncing ideas off one another. And in the end, we had this album. And in the beginning, we didn't even know if it was an Ocean album, because the material was quite different and more synth-based, obviously, even after I was done with it. But when we were listening to what we had written there, it felt like an Ocean album, and that's when we started thinking about what to do with this, really. And it felt like it connected with Phanerozoic 2, especially with the second half of that record, where we were already exploring the more dark electronic soundscapes that you also find on the new record. So it made sense somehow to add another chapter to the Phanerozoic series and to the paleontological album series that we started with Precambrian. But all of this was a work in progress. When I wrote Precambrian, I wasn't thinking of Phanerozoic. I was thinking of only what I had immediately in front of me, And then we made the Centric records, which were something completely different, and then Pelagial in 2013, which was also something completely different. And only with Phanerozoic 1, 10 years later, we kind of like returned to Precambrian. And again, that was because of the music, because when I was listening to some of those tracks on Phanerozoic 1, it felt like they had that Precambrian vibe, And so I was like, okay, there's still a couple chapters to go. So it kind of felt like it made sense to go back there. But there was no grand master plan from the beginning. All of that was a work in progress, and it evolved over the years. And I think this is the only way to be creative. While making concept albums, is to really go with the flow and see what you're interested in, rather than putting the weight on your shoulder that you have to deliver like 4 chapters of this and then have it all plotted out and for the next 10 years. That's not really how we work. A lot of it is quite intuitive and not done with a master plan in mind.
Okay. When I first saw when I saw for the first time the cover art from Holocene, the psychological and visual concept as a game of ideas came out to my mind, because when you move the cover, when the art, you see a lot of visions into there. So because this normally when you move this, create a visual effect inside of the mind, etc. So, what were the reasons for using a cover of this type? Is there hidden concept or perhaps an image behind all of this?
Well, the imagery, the circular imagery is making reference to what we've already used on Phanerozoic 2 and basically reflecting in an abstract way the idea of the eternal recurrence, which we've already explored on the idea on the Phanerozoic records. So this is kind of like the closing chapter of the Phanerozoic albums, which were all orbiting around that old philosophical idea. And we wanted to reference that in the artwork as well. That's why you find all these circular shapes also on the Phanerozoic live record, interwoven, overlapping circles. So that was like only the very rough idea in the beginning. Then at the same time, we wanted to have something more modern for this record because we felt that this record is a more modern record. It is actually representing where this band stands in the year 2023. And we didn't want to go back to fossils and to the, the like imagery that we've used on previous albums, not to discredit that, but we just felt that this record is something new and we wanted that to be reflected in the artwork. And so when we started with the whole artwork process, the first drafts we rejected because they were too conservative somehow. And it was quite challenging to come up with something that was modern, but at the same time didn't look like a prog metal record because that we really didn't want that, So it's a delicate balance and a thin red line between creating something that is visually very impactful and iconic and just like flat, especially when you work with abstract graphics like that. So it was quite a challenge. And we wanted to work with different printing techniques and materials and die cuts to create extra layers of depth. I think that came out really well on the physical variants of the record, especially the vinyl, but it was a long work in progress.
Okay. One detail that caught my attention about this new album is that you completely disassociate from Metal Blade Records, and now you are completely under the Pelagic Records. Even you in the past, you released albums with Pelagic Records too. So, and correct if I'm wrong about this. I think this label is like a personal one that the band has to manage, etc., with Chris, etc. So, therefore, what were the reasons for changing from a giant label to a small one? Or perhaps was this, and as many artists told me in certain albums, that the label didn't want to release the album, but you are still within their roster.
No, it was not that. Well, it was a couple of things coming together. We've had a good collaboration with Metal Blade over many years. We're very happy with the work they've done for the band, and they've really helped us reach an audience at a time when nobody knew about us, And so we've done 5 records for them, and in the meantime, I started building up my own label, Pelagic Records, since 2009. Originally because Metal Blade didn't want to release an older Ocean album, I think, on CD. I think they didn't want to release Fluxion, and at that time, they didn't have space in their schedule. So Andreas told me, why don't you do it yourself? And this is how Pelagic started, basically. And since then, a lot has happened, and Pelagic became more than a hobby basement label just to release the Ocean. We have a roster of over 50 artists now, and we've a catalog of 250 releases. So a lot has happened in those 10 years. And right now, our nowadays distribution channels are quite similar, actually. We share the same distributor digitally with Metal Blade, and in the US physically as well, the Orchard. And in Europe, we have a very good distribution network as well. And we hire the same people for promo a lot of times. So like the network that we have with Pelagic is quite comparable, I believe. And that's why we simply got to the point where it made sense to do this ourselves, because the more parties involved, obviously, the more of your income gets taken away. And we felt that we can do this ourselves now with the structures that we've built with Pelagic. And so it was a conscious decision to do it ourselves and to assign the Ocean to Pelagic Records in the end.
Okay.
And it's a bit of an experiment. I mean, it's the first time for us. But yeah, it's also not so different from other bands we worked with, like Mono, who sell a comparable amount of records, and releases like that are of a similar size and magnitude than this release. So it's not that we're touching entirely new grounds with this. It's just that it makes more sense for the band, because Pelagic also could offer better royalty rates than Metal Blade were offering us, and for the label, of course, as well. It's mutually beneficial.
Okay, nice, nice, nice. And what does mean pelagic record?
Well, the pelagic or pelagial is the open sea. It's kind of like the any body of water far away from the coast. And as we explored with the ocean on the pelagial record, it's also a term that's used to differentiate depth zones in the ocean. The epipelagic is the first 200 meters that are sunlit, and then the abyssopelagic and the hadopelagic are the lower regions of the deep sea where almost no light comes through. So this is where the term is coming from, obviously related to the ocean, because the label was kind of founded around the ocean back then. That's how, like, without the ocean, the label probably would have never existed. So that's why I chose a name that was also related to the ocean.
Okay, okay, okay. Nice, 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 nice concept. So the limits of the progressive metal seems to be infinite, because many of bands mix now and experimenting with all possible styles in the world in search of a personalities. I think this is new movement nowadays. Therefore, how do you see the path of ocean into the progressive world that expanding its horizon with new bands? Do you think that at some point of your music will become classic because you have more than 20 years classic and no longer have a breaking point?
I don't know, man. I don't tend to think too much about the future, to be honest, or about like where we will end up or what people will think of us. Time will tell, really. We just do what we love doing, and every album is a new chapter for us, and hopefully also substantially different from the previous chapters. And whether that is resonating within the prog scene or the post metal scene or the heavy metal scene or the stoner rock scene, I don't really think much about. I don't really care much about. I think the ocean comprises elements of all of these genres, you know, to some degree. There are your stoner riffs in the ocean. Yes, there are your prog metal parts, and there are also like the post metal or post rock or shoegaze parts in it. So all of this is an integral part of our music. And when we write songs, we don't think about that. We just do what feels right, you know. And genres are usually being added by other people who listen to the music, and journalists like yourself who write about the music. And it's good because people want to know what to expect, you know. But we don't think in these terms. And so I think what connects us with the prog scene is just the willingness to experiment and to go like unusual routes. But at the same time, we don't listen to a lot of prog metal bands.
Yeah,
you know, like we listen to like a lot of electronic music within the band these days, and a lot of cutting edge avant-garde music, and a lot of really heavy stuff, but not many classical prog bands, actually, you know. So it's kind of funny that we're seen as a part of that scene where we only marginally feel at home at. But that's usually how it goes. And in the end, I don't mind, like, as long as people like our music, and it does, like, I don't care where they come from, you know, what they listen to. That's great.
Okay. Compare this new album with the previous one. For me, there's a calmer phase. There's growing up, because I detected into this new album a lot of phase. The calmer one, the savage one at the end, and the middle one, the between the calmer and the aggressive part. So and obviously, I think these new albums, as usual, and you told me in the previous interview, you always far away from the previous albums. That's normally with your ideas, no? So you told me that you never do the same album two times, so that's normally. So
yeah.
So how do you maintain this level of connection with the fan at the same time expand your ideas into the ocean's music? Because in the end, who listens and buys the material is the fan, and obviously you always know that the band doesn't care about what many people think.
Yeah, I think that's the strong suit, and that's the important part about it, to not think about what your fans think, you know, because if you start thinking about that, you're going to act in a way that will essentially betray you, because you're going to do things that people want you to do and not things that you would like to do, you know. And I think one of the things that we've really built with this band is a following that knows that they can have expectations towards what we do with this band, but they will not always be fulfilled, and there will be surprises. And I think those people that are still there now after all this time, they appreciate that about this band, that no album is exactly like the other, and that we haven't developed our formula with one album and then we just stick to it and keep repeating that formula. I think the people that follow this band now, they appreciate this element of something unexpected, you know. And I think this new record is, for us, it was a very logical step to make this record, but it's also not necessarily a direction. It doesn't mean that the next record is going to sound like Holocene, you know. It's a snapshot of where we were at that moment in time in 2020 when we started making that record.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that there is already a second record that I also wrote around the same time, which is more ideas which is more guitar based. Basically, it's ideas that I wrote while working with Peter on the Holocene material in parallel. And that second record is quite different from Holocene. It's maybe connecting more to the first half of Phanerozoic 2, where Holocene is connecting more to the second half of Phanerozoic 2. So it's a constant process of orbiting around influences and, you know, like your own catalog as well. And that is, of course, propelled by the people in the band and what they bring with in terms of what they're listening to, what they're interested in. And that's why every album is always a snapshot of that moment in time when it was created and the people creating it. And I think that's what keeps it interesting. Sometimes people will be alienated because they are like, oh, okay, I was expecting something else, or, you know, this isn't heavy anymore. And then they trail off. And that's also a normal part of the process. But as an artist, I don't want to think about that. I want to make things that are meaningful for me, most importantly, and my bandmates. And then if other people like it, that's great. You know, then of course we make it for them as well. But to think about what people expect from you is always a bad thing, I think.
Okay. Well, now talking a little bit about the history. The Ocean was born in 2000s, a date when the new metal was playing in all radios, MTV shows, and a lot of programs at that moment. But with Folk Diver in 2003, you left for another. You wrote for a different idea, for another concept. You never do new metal, this kind of musics. So what are your memories of that time at the beginning of the band? And how did the band fight to have the status that those years that you have today to capture the attention of the media? I tell you this because all magazines at that time, covers like in heavy rock, Metal Hammer, and I don't know, a lot more magazines, and all covers are facing the new metal bands, Slipknot, Korn, etc. So how do you fight at that time to get attention to a lot of people?
Well, we were a band that was coming out of the hardcore scene more than things like new metal. Like, I mean, we peripherally followed that, but at that time we were already like listening to completely different things. When I say we, it's also a bit treacherous because I'm the only one in the band that was in the band back then. So the people I played with back then were all people from very different musical backgrounds. Our first bass player was coming from the surf and jazz field. Our drummer was a metal drummer, basically, like a traditional death metal drummer. And our guitar player was coming from the jazz scene also more. So like we were like a very different, very diverse group of people playing together. But I was writing music and I grew up in the hardcore scene of the 90s. So I like in 98, 99, I was listening to bands like Refused and Abhinanda and like the whole Swedish hardcore scene from back then, but also bands like New Roses and Swans and things like that. So new metal just didn't happen for me, really. It was never something that I listened to. It was present in the mainstream media, of course, but yeah, it was difficult to find to get press interested, of course, in what we were doing because it was very niche, you know. But it started working out in Germany through the small label we were working with and the promotion they were doing. And it's always a couple of key persons that were important, you know. Like there was a guy writing for Metal Hammer at that time that really liked the band, and in the end, Andreas from Metal Blade Records. He's an old New Roses fan and he loved what we were doing. And he was the one that got us signed with Metal Blade Records. So in the end, it's always individuals that open the door for you to certain, to certain rooms that you haven't had access to before. And we slowly managed to do that. And yeah, but even nowadays, it's we're too weird for a lot of the conservative metal media, and also like too out of the box for a lot of the big metal festivals, you know. And so it's like it's always been a bit of a struggle finding our place, you know. We played Wacken in 2014, but we also realized that this is not really our crowd or our scene, you know. It was very interesting to play it, but yeah, it's an entirely different world somehow.
Okay. I don't I one thing that I forget to ask you at bueno, 2020 is about the it's about you. Perhaps you have bueno, I think it's very difficult. Next question is very difficult to you to answer with this because your 10 albums are all your 10 songs to 10 songs. So you have a lot of children now, 10 albums. So for you, which album for you is the milestone career, or perhaps are what are which one or are the milestones career the milestone album in the career of oceans of the oceans?
That's again a question that journalists should answer, not the people creating these albums. Like you said, they're all like they're all like children to me somehow, you know, and it's difficult to pick one or pick another, especially because they all wear this timestamp, because they were all written at a certain period in my life when I was going through certain experiences, listening to certain types of music, and so they were very relevant at that moment. And now they're not anymore. So like the most for me, the most meaningful album will always be the latest one, you know. That's like that. I think that's normal. But of course everyone connects music to their own personal experiences equally, like I do as a writer. And so, you know, some people might find more relevance in Precambrian and others in Pelagial and others in the Centric records. I can still relate to all of these records. We still play songs from all of these records live, and it works and it connects with the new material. But like if I have to play ocean songs to someone who doesn't know the band, I would definitely choose songs of Phanerozoic 1, Phanerozoic 2, or Holocene.
Okay.
Simply because I feel more connected with these albums because they're more recent. They were recorded and by the people that are currently in the band, and they feel like tracks that we play live, and they're like where this band is right now. You know, I probably wouldn't play a Fluxion track to them as the first track. So yeah.
Okay. I remember one statement that you told me in 2020 about a lot of reviewers, interviewers, journalists, I relate the music from the ocean, like post metal here, post metal there. So all albums are post metal for them. So and you told me that you are not you don't want to relate with this music because you prefer to do like a more progressive stuff, rock, metal. Even you told me that now, are you repeating me to that you are a fan from the electronic music, heavy stuff, different kind of prog metal music. So now, after well, more than 20 years, the Ocean Collective is considered one of the biggest stones into the post metal or progressive post metal band. So how do you see this song? How do you accomplish one of the main, or one of the last, I think one of the last greatest bands into the post metal progressive metal?
Things just happened by playing lots of shows and tours, touring relentlessly over the past 20 years, you know, and eventually people take notice. And took a long time for us, I think, like I said, because we were always doing something that is a bit out of the box and not just developing a certain formula, which makes it easy for people to adhere to. So it took maybe a bit longer than usual. But I think in the end, if you're persistent at what you do and you deliver good quality stuff over time, then people will eventually take notice. And so, yeah, I'm quite happy with where we are right now.
Okay. Well, talking about other topics, during the restrictions to the pandemic, we were discussing the options that the bands were using to keep in touch with the fans, like streaming shows. Now that everything is back to normal with festivals, shows, tours, etc., we have real concerts again. So, but recently, artificial intelligence is becoming more and more accessible to people, and discussion is about its impact in different aspects in our lives, including the art and music. So, what is your perspective about this issue? Do you see yourself using to make a cover art, for example, in a new album from the from the Ocean or perhaps other bands, or even asking an AI intelligent an AI to compose something for you?
No, we would never do that. I think it's a very interesting debate, and it's shocking to see how good some of the results are that are created by artificial intelligence. In terms of technical execution and graphic design, um, like yes, you can absolutely have something created for you that way, where probably a lot of people wouldn't even be able to tell. And this is somehow scary, because it kind of like makes, if that really works and if that's really the case, then it kind of makes human creativity obsolete to some degree, and we don't want that to happen. Which is why we would never go that route. We love the process of working on artwork and brainstorming and having different people involved, and also all the failures that are a part of the process. Like the coolest stuff happens out of failure, because you realize you have an idea, you try something and it doesn't work, and then you try something else, but because it doesn't work, it sends you in a certain direction, and you will try other things, and eventually you end up at something that you feel is great, or that represents your artistic vision, or where you were headed. And the process is very important in that. It's not just about the result, and I think artwork should in general not just be judged by the final outcome. I think the process of getting there is very integral, and not just for the viewer, also for the artists creating it, of course, because it has so much more meaning when you know that you had to go through certain detours and try certain things that didn't work out in order to end up where you wanted to end up. And I think most meaningful, impactful art is the result of such a long and tedious process, and not something that can just be created by a formula, basically. And that's why so far I have not found any work created by artificial intelligence that really blew my mind, in a way where I was looking at it being like, wow, this is incredible. Like lots of quality stuff, but nothing that really had an emotional impact on me. And in the end, that's what great art does, like you stand in front of something and you're like, this is fucking awesome. And first you don't even know why, but it grabs you by the throat, and it takes you to places somehow. And this experience I simply have not had with any art created by artificial intelligence yet. But I also have to be honest and say it's also not that every human created artwork does that to me. Only very few do, so this is a rare experience, but kind of like this is what art should be about. It's to choke you in a way, to take your breath away, and to make you feel uncomfortable, and make you think, and make you take a different perspective on certain things, and to stir you up emotionally. This is the whole reason why art exists, I think. And not every human created artwork can do that, but so far I have not seen one artificial intelligence created artwork that did that to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we're very close to finishing this interview, Robin. And so for that, what are the future plans that the band has for this new album? Perhaps more videos upcoming, tours of Europe, in US, Asia, who knows? Or perhaps you will return to Latin America at the end of the year or next year.
We would love to, absolutely. We would love to come back for a bigger festival. We're currently exploring the possibility of that for South America and Central America. What's confirmed now is some summer festivals in Europe, which will be the first time we're going to be playing some of the Holocene material live. So we haven't really started rehearsing yet. We're going to start getting together in June and working on the new show and the new tracks. It's going to be a complete case of relearning, because we forgot everything since we wrote it and recorded it. It's always like that, because there's so much time passing in between the different stages of making a record. So now it's going to be the third time we're going to relearn those tracks, and now for good for the touring cycle. So we're excited about that. And then in September, October, we're touring Europe. We're going out on a co-headline bill. And then after that, we're looking to get back to the US, but nothing is confirmed or planned yet. So these are the most imminent plans. We also want to go back to Australia. We haven't been there since 2019, so it's about time. So yeah, lots of touring for sure, and we're looking forward to take this record out on the road.
Okay, thanks for this info. So, well, Robin, the sad moment and came to this interview. I hope you enjoyed this one like me. You're a terrific guy. That's the first time we spoke. Now the second time, terrific guy. Congratulations on this new one. So thank you very much for your time. Really, I really appreciate it. So maybe you have something to add to your Latin fans and Metalero followers.
We hope to be back soon after this great tour in December last year. We can't wait to get back to Central America and South America, and hopefully also to the countries we haven't played yet, like Peru, for example, and Colombia. We really want to do that. I would also love to get back to Ecuador. We've done that in 2016 and it was awesome. But yeah, so hopefully we can do a couple more shows the next time we'll come down, and we're definitely working on that.